1-866-95-PATRIOT, The Mike Church Show on Sirius XM Radio. The Mike Church Show has a message. When we were children, we collected guinea pigs. Now, living under the Obama administration, we are guinea pigs.
Well, the rigged CNN poll has dear leader's approval rating at 56%. The more accurate Rasmussen poll has it at 50. Gallup has it at 50. Disapproval rating higher than George W. Bush, at the exact same point in his administration. Now, I'm going to say something here before I go to Rand Paul. Real quick, I'm just going to say something here. 1-866-95-PATRIOTS, my telephone number. Websites at MikeChurch.com. The Joker, the Obama Joke T-shirt is up and on the front page. Go check it out. Now, without further ado, I believe live in the studio now, we have candidate for U.S. Senate from the great state of Kentucky. Rand Paul is live and in studio. Rand, how are you, my friend?
Good to be with you, Mike.
So I saw you made the television rounds today. How's it going?
Oh, quite well. We've had several national television interviews, several radio interviews. Of course, none as important as this interview, but we have several radio interviews around town, and we're having media phone calls with those in the state of Kentucky as well.
Now, just tell the listeners out there who may not be familiar with Rand Paul, you are Ron Paul's son. You are a doctor, but you're an ophthalmologist. Do I have that right?
Right. I'm an eye surgeon in Bowling Green, Kentucky.
Eye surgeon. Okay, that's right. Right. You're an eye doctor. Okay. And your affiliation in politics thus far has just been by proxy with your dad. And I heard him today say that, oh, he's out there. He had his little tax groups and this and that and the other. And this is his first foray into this.
Right.
Tell us about the tax groups. I know you've been affiliated with or you have been at some of the events with the Campaign for Liberty. What does Rand Paul bring to the table for the fine people of the great state of Kentucky, formerly part of Virginia? What do you bring to the table that your opponents do and will not?
Well, I think, for the past 17 years in Kentucky, I have had a group called the Kentucky Taxpayers United. One of the things we promoted is something called the Taxpayer Pledge. This is done by the Americans for Tax Reform. And it's a pledge promising not to raise taxes. Now, I've taken that pledge, but I've also taken another pledge, and that's that I will not vote for any budget that's not balanced, whether it's a Republican budget or a Democrat budget. I think for too long we've had career politicians on both sides of the aisle who really are unwilling to address the debt problem. During 8 years of a Republican administration, we doubled the debt from $5 to $10 trillion. Right. Now we've tripled the annual deficit in 1 year to $1.75 trillion in a year, and I think that debt eventually will bring us down as a country.
Now, when you say bring us down, if you just elaborate, I know what you're talking about. You're talking about the dollar crashing, and you're talking about the debt being unsustainable and for actual rationing of governmental services to occur, right?
Well, the interesting thing about the debt is a lot of people will say, and I think this is correct, that our children and our grandchildren will pay for it. But I think we pay for it more immediately because to pay for the debt, you can either tax the people, which we're not taxing enough to pay for the budget, or you can borrow. We've borrowed $700 billion from the Chinese, $700 billion from the Japanese, over $100 billion from the Saudis. But we're still short of money, even with taxes and borrowing. So the third way you pay for a deficit is by printing money. And as the Federal Reserve prints money, the money you have becomes worth less and less, and that's price inflation. I think we will begin paying for this debt within 1 to 2 years through price inflation that will rival 1979, if not worse.
And what would happen? Rand Paul, Kentucky candidate now for the Kentucky. I haven't kept up with this. Rand, is Senator Bunning not running, or are you challenging him in a Republican primary?
Senator Bunning has decided to retire, and he is not going to seek re-election. So this will be an open U.S. Senate seat. It'll probably become one of the biggest races in the country.
And I think it'll be fun to watch here, because if you share the values and the affinity for the founding and the doctrinaire endorsement of the Constitution as your father does, because I can't get in a room with these guys, but I look forward to hearing you actually defend the Constitution and maybe tell some of these Democrats or some of your opponents, I wouldn't vote for that because the Constitution says that I won't. Am I putting words in your mouth, or does that pretty much sum up your point of view when it comes to being a U.S. Senator?
Well, I've traveled around the state of Kentucky to about 20 counties so far, and I say it at every stop. The Constitution enumerated certain powers, and they're the only powers the federal government is supposed to have. If you look at our current federal government, probably half of what we do is unconstitutional. It's gotten so bad, though, that people don't even bring up the Constitution. Look at the bank bailout. There's no justification for the government to own private banks, but it gets worse. Now the bank bailout's being used to bail out the car industry, and specifically when Congress voted not to bail out the car industry, the administration simply took the money from the TARP funds, the bank bailout funds, and did it anyway. Then leaped forward to the Chrysler bankruptcy, and they're now using the bankruptcy law or the bailout law to supersede bankruptcy law to say, guess what, you guys that are preferred bondholders like the teacher's pension of Indiana, we're going to leapfrog you and give the money to the AFL-CIO.
And we've seen we haven't seen the results of that because you don't know what the state of Indiana is going to have to do to make up that shortfall. I mean, my God, that's $3 billion, I believe, was the total that those pension holders had in escrow in Chrysler bonds, if I'm not mistaken, that were just violated. And we do have in the Constitution the contracts clause. Let me ask you, just move on to another subject here that I know you like to talk about here. Your dad has been the most vocal opponent of the Federal Reserve. Recently, I ran some audio tape here of a clip that I had gotten from C-SPAN. And Cynthia, what was that guy's name? The Democrat congressman who was sitting right next to your dad.
Alan Grayson.
Pardon me?
Alan Grayson, I think.
That's right. Congressman Grayson was sitting right next to your dad. Was like, Mr. Bernanke, I have your report right here, sir. $557 million loaned to foreign companies. Can you explain it? And of course, Wild Ben couldn't explain it here. The Senate doesn't have, it seems, the type of oversight over the Federal Reserve that the Congress has. If you were elected senator, would that become something that you would tell your Senate colleagues and you would push for that, hey, our money supply and monetary policy is one of the most important things we are sent here to do?
Absolutely. I think our Congress knows more about the CIA than they do about the Federal Reserve. I think we need to know what they're buying. For example, the bank bailout bill was $1 trillion, but the Federal Reserve increased their asset sheet by $2 trillion with no vote of Congress and no revealing what they're spending it on. Some are estimating that 40% of the money that the Federal Reserve is printing is not buying our U.S. Treasury bonds anymore. It's buying used car loans and bad home loans. You know, the fact that the dollar is not backed by anything but promises, at least it used to be backed by governmental promises of Treasury bills. Now it's backed by used car loans and bad home loans.
And I don't know if you saw the headline, but there's a projection out there that half of U.S. half of U.S. mortgages are going to become insolvent by 2011. Is it the Congress? Is it the president? And aren't these politicians in Washington? Aren't they just piling problem on top of problem? When instead of letting the market work this out, instead of letting the market liquidate, instead of letting foreclosures take place, instead of letting bankruptcies take place and contracts be honored, aren't they just forestalling Judgment Day, Rand?
Well, I guess, Mike, you're way behind the times. You haven't heard about the new economics. All you have to do is send money to people and tell them to purchase things. So if you need a car, we send you money to buy a car. If you can't make your home mortgage, why not just send money to every individual and then they pay their home mortgage? It's ridiculous. No one asks, where is the money coming from? Where do you get the money for people to buy these cars? The other interesting thing, and Peter Schiff made this point recently, is that when you bring your old car in, it's completely paid for, and they're giving you money to get another loan for a car that you probably shouldn't be purchasing in the first place.